Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RealClear Politics Takeaway for Thursday, September 9th. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP.
And I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Cannon. Two topics to cover today. First, Joe Biden is giving a speech on COVID later this evening. It just got released that he is going to sign an executive order mandating vaccines for all federal workers. Carl, what do you make of this? The Biden administration is struggling to get a hold of the Delta variant. And at the same time, we seem to be headed toward a situation where there's going to be, there's a dichotomy between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed.
Well, I saw, and I don't know if it's completely accurate, but it sounded right, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 100% vaccinated. So what that tells me is there still is such thing as leadership. I don't know if it's in politics. It's certainly in sports. And if Tom Bevan is a quarterback, and if we had a leader who people believed in the way the Tampa Bay Buccaneers believe in their quarterback, I think we'd be 100%. But look, Biden, like President Trump before him, said he'd get on top of this. He said he'd make this go away. He said he'd deal with it. The Delta variant turns out to be very stubborn, easily communicated. You've got a small a minority of Americans, Tom, who won't be vaccinated. And I think the president's he's using the tools in his arsenal. I mean, I got no problem with it, but what do you think?
One of the things I was mentioning, so Jimmy Kimmel came back last night and said, or night before last, and one of his first jokes was that, he doesn't think that there's really an issue here about making choices about ICU beds. If you're vaccinated, come on in. If you're, not vaccinated and you've, quote, gobbled horse goo, then, RIP Wheezy, I think was his phrase. I mean, there is this idea that, and this is a point that is being made now, Democrats, a year ago, universal health care was a human right. And now it's only if you are of the same political persuasion or have the same views that suddenly you should get access to emergency medical care at all.
Well, Tom, that's not quite right. We've been through this. We've talked about this. You and I have. There are different cohorts of people who are vaccine reluctant, conservative, libertarian type. Trump supporters in the South and Midwest are one cohort. African Americans are another. I don't think this has to do with who you vote for, but and look, and Jimmy Kimmel, that's an ignorant, thing to say. And this idea that there was some epidemic of people taking this drug, that
ivermectin.
Yeah, that turned out to be one step above a hoax. But there's a serious issue here if you're a medical professional. You have people, if you got states like Alabama where the ICU beds were very scarce and other places, and you have people who have cancer treatments, you have people who've been doing everything right to monitor their health, and they can't get an ICU bed because some person who refused to get a vaccination is there with COVID. I think that's an ethical dilemma. I think people are struggling with that, and I don't blame them.
All right, we're going to have to talk more about that in a future date, Carl, because there are questions about, well, should we therefore be denying service to folks who are, not eating healthy or not taking the proper medication, right? Are we gonna deny medical care or ICU beds to people who are smokers, who should know better but still do it anyway? But we'll save that for another day. Let's shift gears because we got to talk about the California recall. It's coming up on Tuesday. Kamala Harris was there yesterday. Joe Biden's apparently going there in the coming days. It looks like the latest polling shows Gavin Newsom, strengthening his position, but they are still pulling out all the stops in terms of not taking anything for granted, bringing people in to campaign on his behalf. Barack Obama cut ads for Newsom. Does that mean that they're just putting the pedal to the metal here, at the finish line, or are they really worried that something could happen on Tuesday, that could be a surprise for Gavin Newsom?
Well, they've been mailing out ballots for a long time, so in one sense, this seems a little late to me. But But look, it can't hurt. And what they're obviously trying to do, because Democrats have a huge voter registration advantage in California, is pump up support among Democrats, people who voted in the past for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when she ran statewide, and Barack Obama when he ran twice for president. That's what they're trying to do, and it makes sense. My question is, and I guess I'm going to throw it back to you, Tom, because you pay as close attention to the polls as anyone in American journalism. Is how hard is it to poll people in a recall election? How hard is it to make sure you're getting the right people? You know, the polls show Gavin Newsom seems to be okay, but are those the people who are really going to vote on September 14th?
Well, right. I mean, it's hard to poll, recall races. And this one's happening on a Tuesday in the middle of September. I mean, how many people are actually, paying attention, or they say they're going to go to the polls, but they won't. There could be a surprise. I mean, I think there very much could be. Again, they've already gotten, I think, over 6 million ballots back. And apparently the numbers look pretty good. I think half of those are Democrats. So it looks like Democrats who were kind of sleepy about this for a while may have woken up just in time to perhaps save Gavin Newsom's hide. One more question, though, Carl. We had an incident yesterday. Larry Elder was campaigning. He was at a campaign stop. And he had a white woman, presuming she's a liberal. Don't know that for 100%.
Well, I wouldn't say liberal, but she's an activist, maybe a radical, Tom.
Whatever. Wearing a gorilla mask.
Yeah.
Threw an egg at Larry Elder. Didn't hit him with that egg, but and then there was a confrontation between one of Elder's security people.
That woman who threw the egg also punched twice an Elder aide in the face.
And another guy did as well. And then they were yelling, obscenities at Larry Elder to tell him to get out of here, that kind of thing. Pretty nasty treatment. Someone made the observation on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. The entire National Press Corps went berserk because they thought they heard someone at a Colorado Rockies game yell the N-word.
He didn't actually.
And he didn't actually. He was just calling for the mascot. This episode is being mentioned in some stories I read, in the New York Times, in like the 14th paragraph. It was mentioned in the LA Times.
The Los Angeles Times covered it. They did a story on it. They did a story on Carl. It was mentioned as part of a broader story that, there was a confrontation at a rally, but the headline certainly wasn't woman in gorilla mask throws egg at African-American. White woman in gorilla mask, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, look, I think the treatment of Larry Elder during this recall race by folks like this woman, but also members of the media and pundits who have called him, repeatedly the black face of white supremacy was just
that was a headline in the Los Angeles Times over a column that actually was more thoughtful than that. But that was the headline, the LA Times. Larry Elder's the black face of white supremacy.
What's the proper word for this, Carl? Reprehensible? Is that it?
Look, Tom, I personally believe Larry Elder has no business being governor of California. He's never been in public office.
Fine.
It's kind of obvious.
It's your opinion. But to quote one of our favorite guys, that's like your opinion, man.
Yeah, that's right. but I'm giving that opinion to preface it with this. Obviously, this has no place in American politics, and yet it's becoming commonplace. And in this case, it didn't hurt Elder campaign. It drew attention to what he and Caitlyn Jenner and many of the Republicans are saying, which is that California is losing control of its own streets, its own stores. That these liberal district attorneys and liberal city councils and mayors are turning California into a place where the homeless people and are politically active and demanding that they have a right to live on public streets, and crime is rampant, and that they're losing control. That Californians are losing control of their own state. That underscores Elder's message. So in that sense, if that woman's ever identified and she turns out to be paid for by the Elder campaign, it would make more sense than, that she's trying to actually harm his campaign. Listen, she underscored his message.
Here's part of the problem. This is a media criticism, Carl. I
saw that you were going. I was steering it in another direction. Yeah. Maybe you didn't notice.
If a white person, wearing a gorilla mask, showed up at a campaign event for Stacey Abrams or Raphael Warnock and threw an egg at them, it would be national news. It would be on every show. MSNBC would run it wall to wall, nonstop coverage from morning till night. It would be considered a cautionary tale about
millions of
racism
college
in America.
Millions of college students would say they couldn't go to class because they were so upset and so threatened.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that is not the kind of coverage that we're seeing now, unfortunately. All right. That's my rant. We'll leave it there. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RealClear Politics.
And I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief. And this has been the RCP Takeaway for Thursday, September 9th, 2021.